My name is Margaret Lane, and if you had walked into the kitchen that winter evening, you would have seen a 66-year-old woman standing over a pot of gravy she had stirred for hours, believing she was helping her family feel at home. I remember the warmth from the oven brushing against my face, the smell of rosemary and butter drifting through the air, and the soft clinking of dishes I had polished until they shined. It should have been a comforting night. It should have felt like family. But it didn't. I heard Bree's heels before I saw her. They clicked lightly across the hardwood floor like she didn't want to disturb the perfection she had built downstairs. When I turned, she was standing at the doorway in a deep red dress, her makeup flawless, her expression carefully arranged. She looked like an ad for the holidays, and next to her, I felt like a smudge on a perfect picture. "Maggie," she murmured, "tonight, I need you to eat upstairs. We're short on chairs." I stared at her, then looked toward the dining room. The table was set for 8 chairs, candles glowing, silverware aligned like she measured each distance with a ruler. There wasn't a single thing out of place, except, apparently, me. "I cooked everything," I said, not accusing, just confused, the way a person speaks when they're trying to understand where they lost their place. Bree smiled like she was patting a child. "I know, and we're grateful. But Daniel's co-workers are here. It's just better if you give us space tonight. You understand?" I didn't. Not then. But I carried the pot upstairs anyway. I sat alone on the edge of my bed, the plate she'd fixed for me cooling too fast, the sounds of laughter rising through the vents like a party happening in someone else's home. That night, she banned me from my own dinner table. What she didn't know was that the chair she took away from me wasn't just a seat, it was a line she crossed. And before long, that line would be the very thing that cost her the house she thought she owned, because that night was the last time I let myself be invisible. When I first moved into the house in Willow Creek nearly 3 years before that awful winter dinner, everything felt strangely bright, like someone had turned the dimmer switch on my life all the way up. Daniel had driven me from my old neighborhood, talking the entire time about how much easier things would be once we all lived together. He kept glancing over as if he were afraid I might change my mind the closer we got to the place. I didn't. I held on to that hope like it was the last warm coat before winter. The house itself looked like every glossy picture you see on real estate websites. Wide porch, gray-blue siding, roses that Bree claimed she planted, even though I suspected they came with the property. When I stepped inside, the air smelled like fresh paint and new carpet, clean, modern, full of promise. Bree came down the stairs the moment we opened the door, her smile bright and practiced, the kind of smile people wear in Christmas cards. She hugged me longer than I expected, sweet and warm like she truly meant it. And for a second, I let myself believe she did. She walked me from room to room, talking about where she imagined the couch would go, how she wanted to decorate Lily's room, how much daylight the kitchen got in the mornings. Everything she said sounded like a door being opened for me. She kept using the word we. We will cook together. We will have Sunday dinners again. We will turn this place into a real family home. That word wrapped around my heart like a quilt stitched from old memories I wasn't ready to let go of. But the truth was, none of this would have been possible without the money I brought. Daniel didn't hide it. He was straight with me the day he asked for help. The mortgage approval was short by a substantial amount, and the house would slip away if they couldn't supply the down payment quickly. I had the money from selling my old home, the last place Thomas and I lived together, but the nights had become unbearably quiet there. I told myself I wasn't giving up anything I still needed. I was simply moving forward. So I gave them the $250,000. The bulk of what Thomas and I had built over 40 years. Because I wasn't foolish, I asked Daniel to speak with Mr. Coleman, an old friend of my husband who specialized in property law. He drafted a promissory note to protect us all. 3 years to repay the money. If they didn't, I would be added to the deed. It wasn't about mistrust. It was about safety, mine and theirs. Daniel agreed. Bree nodded approvingly. Everything felt civilized and calm, and I walked out of Coleman's office believing we had all done the right thing. In the beginning, living with them was gentle in ways I didn't expect. Mornings were filled with Lily's laughter and cereal crunching under her small teeth as she asked me to braid her hair. Bree handed me mugs of coffee and asked for my thoughts on curtains and paint colors. Daniel talked more than usual, relieved to have someone help with the small things he never had time for. I cooked meals the way I used to when Thomas was alive, slow, steady, fragrant, and they all seemed grateful. Lily insisted on goodnight stories. Bree said she appreciated having someone she trusted at home. Daniel hugged me more in those days than he had in the last decade. Sometimes I wondered if I was leaning too heavily into the comfort of being useful. But each time I tried to step back, someone would pull me in again. Bree complimented my cooking. Daniel thanked me for saving them money on childcare. Lily told her classmates that her grandma was her best friend. I took those words and folded them into the empty places of my heart, like paper notes tucked inside drawers. But as months turned into a year, something in the air began to shift. It was subtle at first, like noticing a picture frame is crooked or a familiar song suddenly sounds off-key. Brianna, once warm and eager, started watching me more closely, as if she were trying to decide whether I belonged in the picture she had painted for her life. Daniel seemed stressed more often, quiet during dinners, tense in his shoulders. And there were days when I walked into a room and felt Bree fall silent mid-sentence, her smile freezing like a mask she couldn't quite keep in place. Back then, I brushed the feeling off as insecurity. I told myself I was overthinking, imagining shadows where there was only light. But the shadows were real, and they were only getting longer. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly, the way cold air seeps through a window frame that isn't sealed properly. You don't notice it right away. You just wake up one morning and realize the room isn't warm the way it used to be. It started with my husband's rocking chair. I kept it near the downstairs window, the one that faced the maple tree in the backyard. Thomas used to sit by that kind of window every evening, rocking gently while he read the newspaper. Keeping the chair there felt like keeping a small piece of him with me. One morning, as I came down with a basket of laundry, I noticed an empty space where the chair had been. The sunlight hit the hardwood floor differently without it, sharp and bare. When I asked Daniel if he'd moved it, he said Bree thought it didn't match the new aesthetic. It was too old-fashioned, he told me gently, as if the words might bruise. That afternoon, on my walk around the neighborhood, I spotted the chair sitting in a neighbor's driveway, part of a garage sale. A yellow price sticker glared from the worn wooden arm. My heart thudded hard, and I stood there long enough for the neighbor to ask if I wanted to buy it. I paid for my own chair, lifted it into my arm-ite, and carried it home like something wounded. After that, I kept the chair upstairs in my room. Bree never mentioned it again. The next shift came in the kitchen. One evening, I was making chicken soup the way Thomas liked it, rich with garlic and celery, the smell filling the whole house. Bree walked in from work, her nose wrinkling before she even took off her coat. "Maggie, the smell. It's a bit strong, don't you think?" she said, opening windows as if she were airing out smoke. "My patients could smell it on me today. Maybe we can stick to lighter meals, or use the meal prep service I'm trying?" The soup simmered on the stove, warm and familiar, the way family used to feel. Bree's face, however, was tight and embarrassed. And suddenly, I wondered if my cooking, once something that brought people together, had become something she endured. From that night on, she filled the fridge with plastic containers from the meal prep company, each labeled with calories and macros. I was told I could heat those up whenever I wanted. I still cooked sometimes, but only early in the morning or late at night, when I thought no one would mind. Then came the comments. Not loud, never direct, always in passing. "She moved the living room throw pillows again," Bree whispered to a friend on the phone. "I swear I fix them every day." "I wish she understood boundaries," she muttered once while wiping the counters after I had just cleaned them. And the worst one said lightly, jokingly, when I walked into the kitchen after a grocery run, "Oh, didn't hear you come in. You're like a little ghost in this house." A little ghost. Too quiet to matter. Too present to ignore. Still, I tried to be helpful. I picked Lily up from school. I folded laundry. I organized the pantry when it got messy. I told myself it was normal to contribute when you lived with family. But Bree's gratitude faded into expectation, and expectation slipped into something colder. Whenever her friends visited, she spoke as if I weren't standing right there. "It's convenient having her around," she said once, stirring lemonade. "Free help, you know?" Daniel heard it. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. That silence hurt more than the words. One night, I walked downstairs to put away my teacup and heard Bree on FaceTime with her mother. Her shoulders sagged, her voice brittle. "I'm trying to build a beautiful life, Mom, but having his mother here, it's like sharing my home with the past. I don't want to live in someone else's memories." For the first time, I saw her fear, not of me, but of losing control over the perfect image she'd crafted. It didn't excuse anything, but it made her less of a villain and more of a woman desperately trying not to repeat whatever pain she'd grown up with. Still, knowing that didn't make it easier to bear. The day things finally tipped was a Tuesday afternoon. I had rearranged a shelf in the hallway, only slightly, just enough so that the family photos looked balanced. When Bree came home, she stared at the shelf as if it were a crime scene. "Please stop touching things," she snapped. "This is my home." Her home? The word stuck to my skin like ice. Something inside me curled tight, a knot pulling hard. I felt the truth settling in, slow and heavy. I wasn't part of the home anymore. I was an intruder. And that realization, as quiet as it was, became the first real crack in everything that followed. The night I realized something inside me had broken didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came with a throbbing pain in my jaw strong enough to wake me from sleep. I pressed my fingertips along my cheek, hoping the ache would fade the way small pains sometimes do. But instead, it pulsed harder. A slow, insistent reminder that my body was older than my heart wanted to admit. By morning, the right side of my face felt twice its size. I tried rinsing with warm salt water. I tried holding a cold cloth to my cheek. Nothing touched the pain. When Lily saw me in the hallway, her eyes widened. "Grandma, are you okay? Your face looks puffy." I forced a smile for her. "Just a little toothache, sweetheart." But even speaking sent a jolt through my gums. Daniel noticed at breakfast. "Mom, you don't look great. Well, maybe you should get it checked out." "I think I need a dentist," I said softly. "It feels serious." I called the local clinic. After describing the symptoms, the receptionist said I likely needed a root canal. The cost, even after insurance, was more than I had in my checking account. I'd used most of my savings helping with groceries and small bills around the house. I hadn't expected to need so much of it myself. That evening, as Bree and Daniel sat at the dining table sorting school papers and bills, I approached them. My hands trembled slightly from equal parts pain and embarrassment. I hated asking for help, but the agony in my jaw left me no choice. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I began, my voice softer than I intended. "I need a little help paying for the dental work. It's more expensive than I thought. I can pay it back over time." Daniel looked uncomfortable, but Bree didn't bother hiding her reaction. Her eyebrows lifted, her mouth tightened, and she exhaled like I'd asked for something extravagant instead of necessary. "How much is a little?" she asked. I told her the amount. She blinked, then let out a low whistle. "That's a lot." "It's a root canal," I whispered. "I can't wait. It hurts to talk." Daniel glanced at Bree for guidance, the way he always did when he didn't want to take responsibility. "We've got HOA fees coming up," she reminded him. "Lily's ballet recital, and the house needs servicing. We're stretched thin." I nodded slowly, unable to argue. In their eyes, every expense was more important than mine. "There are low-cost clinics for seniors," Bree added. "They do good work. You should look into that." Her tone wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was dismissive, the way someone speaks to a stranger who has overstayed their welcome. I went upstairs without saying another word. I held the railing tightly, partly because the pain blurred my vision, partly because humiliation pressed so heavily on my chest I wasn't sure I could breathe. I sat on my bed and tried not to cry, but the tears came anyway, warm and uninvited. It wasn't the money that hurt the most. It was the realization that my needs didn't matter, not to them. Later that night, still aching, I went downstairs to make tea. The lights were dim. Voices drifted from the dining room, Daniel's low and tense, Bree's sharp and insistent. I paused in the hallway, hidden by the shadows. "We need our own space," Bree was saying. "This isn't sustainable." Daniel sighed. "She helped us. We can't just push her out." "We're not pushing her out," Bree snapped. "We're doing what's best for our marriage. You said it yourself, you're stressed all the time, and Lily needs structure, not whatever this is." There was a pause. Then Bree continued in a quieter, colder voice. "I found a place. Sunrise Ridge. It's a really nice assisted living facility. They have activities, medical staff, everything she needs. And if she moves there, we can refinance later and finally make this house ours." My breath caught. Assisted living. Not for medical necessity, not out of concern, but as a strategy. A solution to her aesthetic problem. Daniel didn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was small. "It's expensive. We'll manage, or we'll sell the house in a few years. Without her on the deed, we can use the equity however we want." Those words sliced through me. Without her on the deed. I stood frozen, clutching the counter as the room swayed. They talked about my future like it was an inconvenience. They talked about my money like it was gone the moment I handed it to them. They talked about my place in their lives like I was a temporary guest who had stayed too long. When I finally slipped upstairs, the pain in my jaw was nothing compared to the pain cracking open inside my chest. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until the morning light crept through the blinds. As the sun rose, something inside me shifted, slow, heavy, and certain. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the final breaking of the illusion that this house was still home. Whatever it was, it pushed me to pick up the phone and call the only person who might help me reclaim what little power I had left. "Mr. Coleman?" I whispered when he answered. "I need to talk to you. Today." That was the morning everything changed. And that was the morning I stopped hoping they would choose me and started choosing myself. "Mr. Gimi?" Coleman scheduled me for an appointment the same afternoon. His office sat across from the Willow Creek Library, quiet and sunlit. the kind of place where difficult conversations felt a little softer. He listened without interruption as I explained everything, how the tension at home had grown, how the chair disappeared, how Bree treated me, and finally, how I overheard their plan to place me in assisted living for their convenience. When I finished, my throat felt raw. He folded his hands, his expression steady. "Margaret, you're not imagining what's happening, and you're not powerless. The promissory note gives you clear legal standing. They were given 3 years to repay the loan. They haven't. That means you can demand repayment, be added to the deed, or, if they refuse both, pursue a forced sale." Hearing it spoken aloud felt like someone opening a window in a room that had been suffocating me. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. I wasn't retaliating. I was asserting something I had forgotten was mine, the right to be treated with dignity. "I don't want to destroy their lives," I whispered. "You're not," he said gently. "You're protecting your own." He drafted the formal notice and told me to return home and behave as usual. That instruction felt almost cruel, but I followed it. For the next 2 days, I stayed quiet. I made tea, read stories to Lily, and kept to myself. Bree and Daniel didn't notice any difference, which told me more than I wanted to know. On the 3rd morning, the doorbell rang. I was pouring tea when Bree answered it. Her cheerful greeting warped into confusion as a man in a suit handed her a thick envelope. She shut the door quickly, tearing the packet open with trembling hands. Her voice cracked as she called for Daniel. "What is this? Why is your mother demanding $280,000, or half the house?" Daniel came down the stairs, his face draining of color as he scanned the documents. "This is the note I signed, the loan she gave us." Bree stared at him, betrayal flickering in her eyes. "You didn't tell me she could take our house." I stood in the doorway. "It isn't your house. It's the house I helped you buy." The living room felt colder than any winter wind. "Mr. Coleman stepped forward and explained the terms. His voice was calm, professional, leaving no room for arguments. Bree paced in circles, her hands flying through her hair. "This is insane," she snapped. "She's doing this to punish us." "No," I said quietly. "I'm doing this because you erased me, and you planned to move me out like old furniture." Daniel sank onto the couch, rubbing his temples. "We can't pay it back. We don't have that money." "You can add her to the deed," Coleman reminded them. "I will not share ownership with her," Bree shot back. "Absolutely not. Then the court can force a sale," he said. And that was the moment it ended. The illusion, the denial, the fragile fabric of our supposed family. Within weeks, a for sale sign stood in the front yard. The house sold quickly. After paying the mortgage, the remaining amount was split. My portion was enough for a modest condo in a quiet neighborhood filled with retirees and garden clubs. I bought furniture slowly, choosing pieces that made sense for the life I wanted instead of the life I tried to fit into. Thomas's rocking chair sat by the window again, facing a patch of sunlight that moved across the floor each morning. Daniel and Bree didn't fare as well. The sale cracked open everything they had been ignoring: financial stress, resentment, unspoken expectations. Their arguments became louder, sharper. A year later, they separated. Bree moved with Lily closer to her mother. Daniel stayed in a small rental, humbled but quieter in a way that made him easier to love again. He visits me on Sundays now. We sit on my balcony, sipping tea and talking about simple things. He apologizes without speeches. He apologizes by showing up. I forgave him, because forgiveness is something you choose for yourself, not for the person who harmed you. Sometimes a house falls apart so a person can finally stop doing the same. Sometimes losing a home is how you find your way back to yourself.